right now, and it's one step at a time. And every day, every single day, all of us are volunteering our time, working our heads off to try and make the 2024 election fair. And, speaking of Obama, since we were talking about Obama, we haven't talked yet about what the Democratic Party's going to do as a backup plan, as it appears that, 70% of Democrats don't want Joe Biden as their nominee. They feel he's too old. They have concerns about his health. And, everyone kind of assumed that Gavin Newsom was waiting in the wings. But Gavin Newsom gave an interview this week to meet the press, Chuck Todd, and said that, sorry, folks, sorry to disappoint you, but I'm on Team Biden. I'm not going to run. And he said it's Kamala Harris's turn. So it looks like Gavin Newsom just self-deleted himself from the race. So I wanted to ask, I have this theory in my head, guys. Tell me if I'm crazy here, but, I kind of feel like the Biden administration these past 3 years has been a third term for Obama. That basically, everyone's been asking, well, who's really running the country? Because obviously Joe Biden isn't. I think Obama's actually running the country in some shape or form. I think that he's the hidden hand, the power behind the throne. And if it wasn't for that pesky 22nd Amendment that we passed in 1947, Obama might still be the president today. Had he been eligible to run again in 2016, he might have beaten Trump. He might still be in power to this day, but the amendment to the Constitution prevents that from happening. So if Obama, let's just say Obama wanted to find a way back in for a third term, a fourth term, he can't do it because of the 22nd Amendment. He's not eligible to run, but hear me out. The 22nd Amendment does not apply to vice presidential candidates. And just as, back in 2008, Obama chose Biden as his vice presidential candidate, nothing would prevent Joe Biden from choosing Barack Obama as his vice presidential candidate. We know that Kamala Harris is extremely unpopular. There's been a lot of talk about dumping her from the ticket and getting a stronger VP candidate to help a sagging President Biden. I believe that if Joe Biden did that, and if he did bring Obama on as his vice presidential candidate, it would probably be his only hope for beating Trump, for winning. Because let's face it, people would be voting for Obama, not for Joe Biden. They would only vote for Joe Biden because Obama would be on the ticket, the old team together again kind of thing. And then if they won, let's say that Biden dies in office or resigns, or they give him the 25th Amendment treatment and get him out of there, boom, you got President Obama again. I'm just saying, folks, the 22nd Amendment does not prohibit that. It does not prohibit a former president, who is then a vice president, from ascending to the presidency if something happens to the president, if you follow my drift here. So anybody have any thoughts on that? Am I crazy to think that? Anybody?
Lori, you're not crazy. Christina Tobin here.
Thank you.
No, I mean, not at all. And whether it is Obama or somebody really not well known, it is very clearly quite slated, almost improbable the probability is almost 100% that it's slated for Biden to win next year. So until and when an independent candidate runs and then a movement, takes historically 2 to 3% of the population to come around an idea that has a long-term solution direction. Until and when that comes, it will prove, and I am all for overcoming what is seemingly impossible, like Nader in 2008 and doing the ballot drive. That was one of the most strenuous tasks probably to this day was and has been that I've ever taken in my life and undertaken. So it is definitely a possibility, but I think it is very clearly slated for Biden, no matter what decision they make as a VP decide. But I want to spin it towards the positive of that. The fact that Tulsi Gabbard left the Democratic Party last October, pretty amazing. I mean, and the possibility of Kennedy doing that in the last 48 hours for the first time in communicating with him for like the last year, because he was our keynote speaker, Bobby Kennedy, at our 7th, I think, annual United We Stand Festival last year in Texas during South by Southwest. And to have a ticket like Kennedy and potentially a VP running mate like Tulsi Gabbard, I think could really pave the way for something even bigger than that race and really ignite a movement and inspire the over 100 people running for president, the cycle to run for Congress and many more in 2026. So it's definitely, I think what you're saying is very, very much a possibility. But at the same time, I think it is slated. We can see what's happening with the primary for the Democrats to win. Now, if Kennedy wanted to run as an independent and or Tulsi Gabbard, I have submitted a bid, a requested bid to both platforms. And these are the only two candidates at this point that I would pretty much my entire life for a year would be devoted to, aside from doing the presidential debate series and so on. But it takes over 800,000 signatures to get on the ballot as an independent. It's under 50,000 as a Democrat or Republican. That's 800,000 signatures. And the first deadline, I'm looking at it right now, Ballot Access News would be in Utah. Unconstitutional, January 6th. Richard Winger, election law expert, says Utah entry is not a typo and its deadline is clearly unconstitutional, January 6th. So it would need to be announced before then. If anyone were to run as an independent for president, it would be in their best interest to announce yesterday, really, because there are quite a few states that you can start gathering signatures in. And so it is a huge task with a lot of challenges. I've done it once. There's no one else that has that's in the industry that has historically ever gotten an independent on the ballot in 45 states plus DC. And this one would be for 50 states plus DC. I'm willing to do it. And it is very clear to me for the first time since I've known Kennedy in the campaign, it's the first time he has not said no to me as running as an independent in the last 48 hours, which is for me promising. So I'm a very optimist. I'm a realist, and I am hopeful that with him potentially running as an independent and Tulsi Gabbard, she has her book tour in January, but jumping on as the VP would be a very powerful ticket. Of course, I welcome more voices and more choices for all party lines and all ideas, but here for Equal Elections, I really loved everything, Caleb, you had to say. Completely resonated. Definitely down to work with you and collab more closely. We worked with a lot of different organizations like Fair Vote for a decade and Represent Us and Rock the Vote and Headcount, and even companies like Ben & Jerry's and David Bronner Soaps, and so many more, Nature's Path. Just conscious, not just amazing organizations and ideas. And I love the completely nonpartisan take you have there, Caleb. And that's where we come at with Free and Equal Elections. The name comes from Article 1, Section 3 of the Illinois Constitution, which I saw one day doing ballot access out there. All elections shall be free and equal. So it has been slated clearly for Obama once, Lori, as I mentioned, seeing within the Chicago Board of Elections, all the competitors knocked off the ballot. When Obama was a nobody, I'm like, this guy's going to run for president. His ties to Obama and the Democratic House Majority Leader Michael Madigan at that time. So it wouldn't surprise me if that's something that they would do. And I think that's quite not innovative. That's a very realistic thought. And
I mean, yeah, if I was, some high-paid Democratic Party strategist and I was advising Biden, that's exactly what I would advise him to do. I'd be like, you better get Barack Obama on your ticket because you're going to lose if you don't. And it makes me wonder, folks, when I saw Tucker Carlson do an interview this week with Larry Sinclair, right? The guy who claims that he had a brief sexual relationship with Obama several years ago. That's such an old story. I remember it during the 2008 campaign, and it was largely ignored by the media. But now it seems to be coming up again. And I wondered why such a big broadcaster like Tucker would suddenly decide that this guy is newsworthy and give him a platform and let him come out and give him an hour to tell his story again. And of course, you've seen it go viral all across social media this week. And I wondered when I saw that, what was Tucker thinking? Does he also sense that Obama is about to reemerge? And was he trying to maybe blunt the impact a bit of another potential run for Barack Obama, this time as the vice presidential candidate for Joe Biden? Certainly, it's the only way that Obama can legally ever get back into power and occupy the White House again. And I think the writing is on the wall with Joe Biden's age and his health and and his obviously declining mental state. I think a lot of Democrats still love Barack Obama. They would vote for Obama, even though they're technically voting for Biden. Let's face it, when they cast a vote for Joe Biden, if Obama was on the ticket, it's really Obama that they would be voting for. A lot of Democrats want him back, and that pesky 22nd Amendment just keeps getting in the way. So I wanted to read to you the letter that Kennedy 24 campaign manager Dennis Kucinich wrote to Jamie Harrison, DNC chair, this week. And just so you can hear for yourself what the Kennedy campaign had to say about this proposed rule change. It says, "Dear Mr. Harrison, I noted with great interest the appearance of President Biden's campaign manager, Julie Chavez Rodriguez, at the Rules and Bylaws Committee meeting of July 28, 2023. I am respectfully requesting the same privilege to address the committee and answer any questions or concerns they may have related to the candidacy of Robert F. Kennedy Jr. This campaign is requesting full transparency in all matters relating to the nomination process and delegate selection operations. Additionally," he says, "Mr. Kennedy and I are requesting a private conference at your earliest convenience, in person." They're not even going to do this over Zoom. He wants to do it in person. "To ensure that we have a good working relationship with the leadership of the party in a fair, transparent process which promotes our shared values as Democrats. Thank you in advance for your consideration of this request. We would like to participate in the September 14th, 2023 meeting of the committee, and we make ourselves available to meet in conference before that time. Dennis Kucinich, campaign manager, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. for president." So, as I understand it, not just one letter, but two letters were sent to the DNC this week by the campaign urgently requesting a meeting. And I have not yet heard an update as to whether or not the Democratic National Committee is going to grant them that meeting. I have not heard an update this weekend. So maybe we'll hear something on that tomorrow. But this proposed rule change is coming up for a vote this week, this Thursday, on the 14th. So there's a lot to talk about there. So we're going to move on to the next topic, which is actually, it ties right into that. And it's such good news. I wanted to share some good news with you guys because we didn't start on with good news. But, you know, there was a major win in court on Friday. A federal appeals court ruled that the Biden administration overstepped the First Amendment by urging the major social media platforms to remove what they called misleading or false content about the COVID-19 pandemic. And that's upholding the lower court's preliminary injunction. This is a big victory for Mr. Kennedy. As you know, he filed a lawsuit against the Biden administration, 100 members of the Biden administration, including Dr. Anthony Fauci, including the head of the FBI, the FDA, the CDC, pretty much every major player in the administration, and President Biden himself. That was the Kennedy versus Biden lawsuit. That was merged with the Missouri versus Biden lawsuit. So now this ruling affects Mr. Kennedy as well. And the ruling on Friday was by a 3-judge panel of the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Fifth Circuit in New Orleans. And, this case has gone on for several months. I'm sure many of you have been following it, especially if you were censored during the pandemic, or even to this day, if you're still being censored on certain platforms when you say the wrong thing outside the approved narrative about COVID-19. The judges wrote that the White House and the Office of the Surgeon General had, quote, coerced the platforms to make their moderation decisions by way of intimidating messages and threats of adverse consequences, and significantly encouraged the platform's decisions by commandeering their decision-making processes. The appellate court also found that the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the FBI, had used coercion in its interactions with the companies. And those companies took down 50% of the material online that the Bureau's agents flagged as, quote, troublesome. This is a quote from the ruling. Given the record before us, we cannot say that the FBI's messages were plainly threatening in tone or manner, the judges wrote. Nevertheless, we do find the FBI's requests came with the backing of clear authority over the platforms. Now, the court did limit the scope of the preliminary injunction. That injunction would have prohibited officials from numerous agencies from having practically any contact with the social media companies. Instead, the court narrowed the impact only to the White House, the Surgeon General's office, the FBI, and the CDC. Of course, the White House plans to appeal. The White House isn't happy about this. Biden says that all of our interactions with social media companies were proper and that the Department of Justice is reviewing the ruling that came down Friday, and they're considering their options for responding. So I have a feeling that the next stop is going to be the Supreme Court. Would anyone like to chime in on that? I consider it a big, big win for Bobby Kennedy, for free speech, for all of us. Certainly anyone who talked about any alternative narratives to the official narrative on COVID-19 and the vaccines. Any thoughts from our panel? Nick, would you like to jump in on that one?
Sorry, Laura, I did miss part of what you said, but I do think that Bobby Kennedy's absolute, like how dogged he's been in pursuing the administration for the censorship. And this is kind of funny because when I was working on Democratic campaigns with Terry McAuliffe, I actually know some of the people who are probably named in the lawsuit because they were working on the McAuliffe campaign and went on to the Biden White House, like the Biden White House's digital director. And I've had tremendous respect and appreciation for Bobby Kennedy actually being the one that has pursued these big tech companies and the government agencies, for doing this. And this kind of gets to this debate, another debate, that I know has taken place, big debate that's taken place this week, with the conversation between Jimmy Dore and Cornel West. About whether the Democratic Party or the Republican Party, whether the Democratic Party is the lesser evil, so long been considered the lesser evil, or somehow less authoritarian or less fascist. That was a disagreement that we had as the People's Party, and I myself personally with Cornel West, that he still maintains that position. But this is the perfect example of a policy where the Democratic Party is pushing the boundaries of authoritarianism to new frontiers, where the censorship that they have systematized, with the process whereby there's even the development of portals, exposed to it, the Twitter files releases from Taibbi and others. There are government portals between portal and big tech where they instruct them to remove certain things. It's such a clear violation of freedom of speech, of the First Amendment. And I just hope that there is some kind of penalty for this. There should be prison time for doing this and for having systematized it to this level. Of course, the Democratic Party, also the ones during the Obama administration. Obama extrajudicially assassinated American citizens with drones. Obama legalized indefinite detention of American citizens. It was Obama, of course, during the Obama administration that we found out from Edward Snowden about the mass surveillance apparatus that had been constructed, where everything you say or do online, your search history, everywhere you go, your location history, all of that is stored in this massive facility in Utah and analyzed by intelligence agencies. This is the party we're being told is somehow the lesser evil. this party is at the forefront of expanding authoritarianism in this country. That's not even to talk about what the Biden administration did with vaccine mandates. So I'm very happy. And this is the kind of zeal that I hope that Bobby Kennedy would bring to an administration in going after the people in government who have been doing this, in the intelligence agencies that have been doing this. Because I remember, as Glenn Greenwald put it, when Biden won the presidency, he said that the new ruling coalition in the United States is the Democrat Party, Silicon Valley, big tech, the intelligence agencies, and Wall Street. That's the new ruling coalition. And I think it couldn't be more true. And so, and he has a great quote too, where the people who are doing the censoring have never been on the right side of history. Absolutely. The first thing that any authoritarian regime is going to come for is your ability to dissent from it. And so taking a strong stand against that and pursuing it and making sure that there are consequences for that is how we're going to actually dismantle that entire censorship apparatus that has emerged between this fusing of big tech and the intelligence agencies and government.
Absolutely. And one of the lawyers involved in the case, Janet Yuns with the New Civil Liberties Alliance, they're representing some of the individual plaintiffs in this case. They called this decision on Friday a major, unprecedented victory. They said, and I think they're right, that this might be the most significant First Amendment case in the internet age. And it's a crucial outcome for the flourishing of free speech in an era when social media has become the modern public square. And I was curious if Caleb would like to weigh in. You have any thoughts on that, Caleb?
Well, just to reiterate, what I said in my opening, comments, that they are trying to crack down on the right to protest at the same time. I would think that nationalizing big tech at this point would just be common sense, because at this point, I mean, there are no competitors with Facebook. There are no competitors with Twitter. There's no competitors with Instagram. And I think nationalizing them as utilities, making them utilities, or just making them full on public property would be necessary. Because, I mean, when a corporation has that much influence over discourse and such, it is a monopoly. And it's a private corporation. It's going to act in its own interest. I mean, if you read the U.S. Constitution, the founding fathers of the United States, they were obviously not socialists or advocates of a government-run economy, but they stipulated that the federal government must run the post office. And it had to be a government institution, because if the post office was run by a private company, it might offer better service to one region of the country than to another, or to one company over another based on their interests. And there was a feeling that in order to facilitate the market, you needed to have a post office that was independent of the market, that was state run. And that I think the same argument could be made about big tech, and that especially the social media outlets. I would say there's a strong argument there for them being nationalized, because they have a bad effect on our kids' mental health. I mean, there's no way around that Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, these things are not good for our children's mental health. And the reason for that is because it's profitable for the corporations to do that. It's profitable. You get engagement when you incite people to fight with each other. You get engagement when you incite people to harass each other and such. And that they have been set up in a way that they are not good for the mental health of young people. Wouldn't it be better if we had a social media app that was designed by the U.S. Department of Health, or people with the best interest at heart, a social media app that made our kids smarter? And made them more physically fit and well-educated, rather than an app that incited them to fight with each other, to be depressed, to think they don't have a future, to be socially isolated. I can see so many arguments for why in this day and age, social media, the big tech companies need to become public property. They need to be operated in a way that's for the benefit of the whole community. And so I think, when RFK reveals, at this point, we have government agencies that are basically running them already. So why shouldn't they become public property at that point? I mean, if the government is telling them what to do and facilitating them, arranging for them to go viral, and I mean, the government, and there's a whole conversation there. I won't get into it now, but I mean, the U.S. government created Silicon Valley. The market didn't, right? Brzezinski wrote his book about the technotronic era. They knew they could beat the Soviet Union because they had more money to invest. And so the NSA and the FBI and the CIA, they poured all their money into Southern California and they created Silicon Valley. And so, I mean, when the government is creating these corporations, telling them what to do and directing them, it makes no sense for them to just continue operating for the profits of a small group of people, especially when that profit motivation drives them to do things that are against the public interest. At that point, since we basically paid for them and oversaw their development, and people who are supposed to be working for us, these intelligence agencies that are clearly not working in our interests, but are supposed to be public servants, are directing them and manipulating them for political ends. Why not just make them public property? Why not nationalize big tech at this point in the public interest? Just like the post office was nationalized in the late 1700s, you know, the founding fathers. In the modern age, wouldn't the constitutional equivalent of that be nationalizing big tech?
Yeah, Lori, Christina here, just wanted to briefly follow up and say, way to go, Bobby Kennedy. This is a prime example of somebody running for president that will not back down. To file the first lawsuit against Monsanto, we have a Jack McCall, which is a farm. Monsanto, for Kennedy to take on what everybody said. He paved the way. The Hudson River, as it water keepers, keeping the water clean. The real Fauci, the first time I met Bobby was at his home. Maybe I'll have a watercolor made of it one day.
It sounds like Christina's breaking up. I can't hear you. Can you hear me, Christina? I think we might have lost Christina. Oh, no.
Yeah, I can't hear Christina either.
Okay, so I guess she's having some connection issues. In the meantime, I'd like to bring in Dr. Hank because I know that Dr. Hank has been there, done that all throughout the COVID pandemic. Dr. Hank was saying things that the government did not approve of. And I wanted to get his thoughts on this major win at the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals this week. Hi, Dr. Hank. Good to see you.
Hey, Lori. Thanks for having me. Yeah, I've been kind of in and out of the conversation. If we can go back just for a second, you're talking about Bobby running as a Republican. That's an interesting concept. You think he would have a better chance to win, or the people who understand the political process better than I do? What would be his best chance, as an independent or as a Republican, do you think?
My personal opinion would be, honestly, I think he would have a better chance at winning in the Republican Party because they have ballot access in all 50 states, because they do have a more fair nomination process, more fair primary process, because he can debate in the Republican Party, because I think he's stronger than every single Republican candidate in the field, including President Trump.
Right.
I feel that he can beat President Trump. I think he could become the nominee. I think he could beat the pants off of Joe Biden.
But his whole identity ties in with being a Democrat, obviously. That's what I would think would be the biggest obstacle, is him just being willing to do that, don't you?
Yes, I do agree with you there. Obviously, the Kennedys have been Democrats since the days of FDR.
It's like the two terms are synonymous, right?
Pretty much. That's always been the way it was. But I would add, as an old school Kennedy Democrat myself, that the Democratic Party has changed so much from the Democratic Party of JFK and of RFK and of FDR. It's changed so much that, you know, a lot of people today that say that if JFK was around now and he was running for president, he would probably run as a Republican because his values are those that tend to be more embraced by the Republican Party these days.
Yeah.
That's just a fact.
Well, I, like you, really picked up the last couple of days when, for the first time after being directly asked this dozens of times, he now is keeping the door open for Plan B when, you know, he used to say there is no Plan B, right?
Yeah, it's interesting. Now it seems that there might just be a Plan B, and I think it would be wise to have a Plan B because the Democrats are telegraphing in big, bold, neon letters, we don't want you in our party.
Right.
So
I
would
mean,
you
I
really
will
want to
say,
stick around if they don't want you?
you know, and you know so much more of the history than I do. I've really just tuned into Bobby for the past 3.5 years, but basically for the past 3.5 years, I've been stalking him and probably have listened to pretty much anything he's got out there on social media to say. And, you know, I've always been Republican, so I could care less what he runs under. I just want him to be president, which, you know, you and I both agree that there's a massive, massive number of people who have that same feeling. And it seems to be more the strategy and the mechanics how to make it happen.
Yeah, I tend to look at this more strategically. Obviously, I know the obstacles that he would face if he was independent or third party. It's a much, much harder road to the White House. I'm not saying it can't be done. I'm just saying it's the road less traveled. It's the road less financed. It's harder to get that ballot access, almost impossible to get on the debate stage. These are the realities. As much as I would love to see him run independent, I've also been around politics all my life, and I know how this game is played. And it seems to me that the Republican Party has the money, the apparatus, the organization, the ballot access, the debate stage access, and everything that he would need to succeed. And so that's why I am not opposed. I'm not necessarily advocating for it, but I'm not opposed to it either. And I think it's something he should give due consideration when he looks at the list of his own donors, when he looks at the list of his supporters. So many of them are Republicans. Some of our biggest supporters in this campaign are Republicans. Also, when you look at the media coverage he gets, you know, we're in this polarized media landscape. It's either left or right. You notice that CNN and MSNBC haven't invited him on, not for one interview. He's blacklisted at those networks. Even the major networks, ABC, NBC, CBS, I think only ABC of the big three networks has had him on, and we all saw how that interview went. It was a hit piece. You know, they attacked him on his stance of vaccines and then put a disclaimer at the end trying to make him look crazy. So he's not going to get any fair coverage from the left-wing media. This is the media that should be supporting him if he's a Democrat, but they're not. And then you look at the media on the right, where they absolutely adore him. He gets great coverage in the more right-wing media and the right-wing podcasts. And you know, Fox News has been giving the Kennedy campaign amazing coverage. He was on with Jesse Waters last week for a big interview, and then Dennis Kucinich was on Friday.
Right.
So it's interesting, don't you think?
Lori, do you know Dr. Mavrikakis, who's right underneath you, Irene? Have you talked to her before?
Irene. Yeah, I see her.
Because one of these days she's going to tell us about a debate that's going to be open up for both parties, and that should be very interesting to open up the conversations.
We were just talking about that, and I sent Irene a speaker's invite. I noticed that Christina popped out for a bit, so I wanted to have Irene on here to talk a little bit more about the free and equal debates that we're planning for December, and bring you up to speed on that.
Oh, so you're aware of those. So that's what we're calling them, the free and equal debates?
Yep. They've been around for a long time, about 15
years. Oh, good.
years.
She's got a microphone now. Good.
Yeah. Hi, Irene. Good to see you.
Hi, Lori. Welcome. Hi, Nick. Hi, Caleb.
Hello, my friend.
Hi, everybody. Yeah, so free and equal elections has been around for a very long time. I'm the new executive director as of about 3 months ago. And yes, we're planning a series of presidential debates that essentially through ranked choice voting, we the people would pick the top 6 presidential candidates to be in the first debates. And the criteria for pre-primary and post-primary debates, of course, would be different. And so Christina has been working on this for a very long time, and she spoke earlier for some of the people that joined later. But really, this process could really be revolutionary if we change all of these things at the same time. My personal opinion is the best chance for Bobby Kennedy would be an independent run. And although I'm an advisor to a Libertarian presidential candidate, Mike Termat, who also speaks about similar issues that Bobby Kennedy talks about, and we have a medical freedom platform, I'm a huge fan of Bobby Kennedy and would be happy with either one of them being president. So I think the Free and Equal Election Project is part and parcel to we the people not participating in the duopoly that has really corrupted our electoral system.
And the Libertarian Party, I'm glad you're here because you're a fellow Libertarian. And I also just sent a speaker's invite to my friends at the Oregon Libertarian Party. I see that they're here. I did want to solicit the opinions and the advice of the Libertarians. I also sent an invitation to Angela McArdle, National Chair of the Libertarian Party. I hope she'll pop into this space because, of course, I have a bias. Obviously, I've been a Libertarian for 27 years. Nothing would make me happier than to see Bobby run with my party, the Libertarian Party. But, I also understand that we are a smaller third party, or actually the largest third party in the United States. We do have ballot access in all 50 states. We've been around for 50 years or more, since 1972. It really is a great party, and we need a great candidate. We do have a field this year of some interesting candidates that are starting to declare, starting to get into the race. Many of them I would support if Bobby Kennedy wasn't in the race. But I think he'd be a good fit for the Libertarian Party. And I wanted to ask my fellow Libertarians out there, if anybody else would like to speak, if you think that Bobby Kennedy would be a good fit for the Libertarian Party ideologically, from a practical standpoint. Would the Libertarians embrace a Democrat? These are the questions that I have, and very curious to hear what any of my fellow Libertarians think. Irene, you have any thoughts on that?
So, of course, I can speak to this on my own opinion as a Libertarian. A lot of what he says, particularly when he talks about the regulatory capture issues in the public health sector, and the whole detail by which he goes into the corruption of the pharmaceutical industry, is very libertarian leaning. And I was listening to you guys talk about super delegates in the Democrat and Republican Party, and I learned a lot, and I was also learning a lot as to what they're trying to do in the last few days with these extra super delegates, per se. The Libertarian Party chooses their candidate at the convention, which we'll have in May, and delegates from each state will cast their ballot for who they want to nominate. And president and vice president are not necessarily or even particularly tied together. And whether or not the Libertarian Party would embrace Bobby Kennedy, I don't really know the answer to that question. There are some things that he has a stance on that are not particularly libertarian, but I think Bobby Kennedy has grown so much over the last 5 to 10 years, and he is a Democrat of the old Democratic Party, for which I was a part of many years ago. So I think we should always have a discussion. I do a lot of coalition work. I think anybody who's not part of the establishment is a friend. And I think we should put forth all the choices across the political spectrum so that we, the people, can decide who would be best to restore our constitutional republic. So I don't know how other libertarians feel, but he does have libertarian takes on some items.
Yeah, and he does have a lot of libertarian support. And I like that he's been going out of his way to win over a lot of libertarian voters. He appeared at Pork Fest this year up in New Hampshire. He was there this summer. If for those of you not familiar with Pork Fest, that's for porcupine, not pork like pork ribs, and it's Porcupine Festival. It's an annual gathering up in the woods of New Hampshire. Tulsi Gabbard was there this year. Dennis Kucinich spoke this year. Had an amazing lineup of speakers, and it's like the Woodstock for libertarians. They camp out in the New Hampshire woods for a few days, and it's all kinds of fun. And Bobby appeared there this year and really made a big splash. The libertarians really did seem to like him. So I wanted to bring in my Oregon Libertarian friend, the host of the Oregon Libertarian podcast, and get your thoughts as a Libertarian. Do you think that Kennedy fits in the Libertarian Party, and do you think that Libertarians would embrace him?
Hi, Lori. Yeah, this is Will Hobson. I'm chair of the Libertarian Party of Oregon, and I'm also the host of a podcast I need to do a lot more often. Yeah, in regards to Bobby, I obviously like a lot of the things that he says. I sense that he has a lot of bravery, obviously for what he's doing, and that's definitely an attribute I want in my candidates. I want them to speak the truth, come what may. That being said, yeah, there are some obviously, big issues that a lot of libertarians would not back him on, gun rights, Israel. Those are some things I think a lot of us Libertarian Party would have, some major problems with. And I think that's honestly the beauty of working in coalitions, is that we can, if you are someone that is, significantly different from our particular flavor of politics, we could still work with you, but we don't have to call, we don't have to call you, what we are. You don't have to call us what you are, like we can say, okay, we're going to work together on these issues. We're going to move the ball forward. And then once that's off the table, now we can argue, debate about these other things that we have disagreements on. So at least the thing that's been bugging us that we all agree on is taken care of. And so that's why I really like working in coalitions with a lot of the people that are here. Because I know everyone's like, man, if we could just put our differences aside, we could actually accomplish quite a bit, get it off the table, and then we could actually start a really meaningful conversation about the things that we disagree with and why we disagree with them. One of the really powerful observations I made the last 2 years during the COVID years is that I worked with a medical freedom group here in Oregon that was almost completely conservative Republican. And when I worked with them for a really long time and I got to talking to them and stuff, I was kind of the token libertarian in the group, even though a lot of libertarians are for medical freedom, but I would just happen to be one of the activists working with them a lot. And they would start to come to me in private and be like, hey, Will, you're really knowledgeable about foreign policy. Can you explain what's going on here? I trust you. And I think you say a lot of things that I kind of agree with. And so there's a lot of now Republicans in Oregon that are like, the wars are, not in our best interest. Being in Ukraine is not a good idea. Will showed me all these, stories and articles and facts, that made me question, like the war state. And, I really think that's the power of coalitions, is that, you don't immediately have to be my friend, but over time, as we build trust with each other, we can start to have a much more productive, much more powerful exchange of ideas, because we have built some bonds of trust with each other. And now we can actually talk without it being, like, oh, you're just trying to destroy me and my group. I don't have to listen to anything you have to say. So in that regard, though, I really like Bobby Kennedy on the things that I agree with him with. I would love to do issue work with him. If he did try to run in the Libertarian Party, he'd be hard pressed to earn delegate support, which is how you win the presidential nomination. But it's not impossible, I guess. But I just think it would be a massive uphill battle, and he would have to change his positions on some pretty significant things.
Well, we libertarians, we're very tough.
This space was downloaded via spacesdown.com. Visit to download your spaces today.
Critics, aren't we? And our national conventions every year, we have some great debates. We hash it out. Unlike the other two big parties that don't allow much dissent, and minority reports don't usually get very many votes. And, the libertarians, we really do hash things out. And we're a big tent. And sometimes the problem with being a big tent is you have so many conflicting, wide-ranging ideologies that when we get down to the nuts and bolts of policy, things can get pretty heated. But that's what I love about the libertarian experience and the Libertarian Party. We are tolerant, but we also have really spirited debates about the issues. And I wanted to also solicit some thoughts from Mike Kelly, who's got his hands up. He's also a libertarian here, and I wanted to get Mike's thoughts on this. If you unmute your mic and say hello, Mike. How are you doing tonight?
Hey, great, Lori. Thanks for having me on. Hello, everyone. So I think about this in a very interesting way. We're coming up on a very crucial election in 24, and everybody's looking for an alternative to Trump or Biden because, you know, nobody wants that. A lot of people don't want that. So I think if RFK were to run as an independent and try to seek maybe an endorsement of a I say third party, emerging party, that would be the way, because I think right now, you know, listening to like Larry Sharp, and ballot access in New York is going to be just about impossible from the way, from his take on it. So if we have a candidate, or whoever our candidate is, it's going to be very hard for them to get 50 state access with what's going on in New York. It's going to be easier for an independent to get 50 state access with the laws and the way they're written in New York. So an independent may, you know, be one of the only ways in 24 that someone outside the duopoly can get 50 state ballot access. And maybe if we did endorse him, we could have the VP, our VP, be his, you know, with him. I don't know, but
that's an interesting idea. I kind of like that.
And I think that would be a way forward, because there is a scenario where the Republican candidate, if it's Trump, doesn't have 50 state ballot access either. If one state, say Georgia, where Kemp hates Trump, is the Secretary of State there, or doesn't like him, and they use 14th Alpha, the disqualification clause, to take him off the ballot if he is the Republican nominee, and he has only 49 state access, and he's missing a key state like Georgia, Republicans may think, well, Trump has no way to win if we can only get 49 states, and the one state we're missing is Georgia, which was is a key state to a Republican win. And if you have an independent that has 50 state access and a known name like RFK, that could be a recipe for success. For one, he could pull from both sides of the aisle, from the Dem and Pub population, and then he would definitely pull moderates. And if he had third party, like a third party, maybe two, endorsing him as well, that could be a recipe to win.
Yeah, it sure could. And, you know, I think I want to see if there's any other libertarians who'd like to speak. Just while we're on the topic of libertarians, I see my friend Ron Well is here, who is a longtime Ron Paul supporter, has become a friend of mine, strongly supports Kennedy, and is looking to become a delegate so that he can be a delegate for Kennedy, presumably at the Democratic Party National Convention next year, assuming that Bobby is in fact still running as a Democrat at that time. But hey, Ron, well, why don't you unmute your mic and say hello? Good to see you here.
Hello there, everyone. I just came back from DNC delegate training thing. I personally, I love to see Bobby Kennedy run as a independent first. My second choice is the Libertarian Party, which I'm a Ron Paul social libertarian or something like that. And then if Bobby stays as a Democrat, I'll just hold my nose and then because Bobby needs like a loyal delegates to the convention, so I will be there for him. Although I personally prefer for him to see him run as an independent or libertarian. So I already have my plan of having my own revolution called Bobby Pride Revolutions or something like that. It's basically like there was this child star who I like, so I plan to donate for the third time. But this time it has to be for my important journey. So basically, yeah.
I love that. And I love that you're going to be a delegate. Oops, we got a strange echo going on there. I'm going to mute your mic, Ronwell, because when I talk, I hear my voice coming back at me in some sort of weird echo. I did want to talk about something else tonight because I'm about to open the floor to anybody and everybody who wants to ask a question or make a comment. But something I'd like to ask anyone out there who is participating in the National Day of Service and Remembrance tomorrow or all this weekend to remember 9/11. You know, tomorrow is 9/11. And Robert Kennedy has put out a call to action to all of his supporters. And he's asking us to organize or to just participate in some sort of service project in our local communities to answer President Kennedy's call to do something for our country. And we are asking our volunteers to organize these events all weekend, started on Friday and today and then tomorrow. Bobby is out there participating in these events. Did one in South Carolina tonight. He'll be in New Hampshire all weekend. Tomorrow in Walpole, New Hampshire. And then on the 13th, he'll be in Rye, New Hampshire. And it's not too late, you know, if you want to do something tomorrow, even if you don't organize an event, there might not be time to do that. But you could go volunteer at your local homeless shelter for a few hours or a food bank or do something nice for your elderly neighbor. Some act of service, some act of love for the country and for the people. That's up to you. You know best what your community needs. You and your neighbors, you know what they need. So give them a hand if you're in a position to. You could help fix up a school. You could help repair a neighbor's home who can't afford repairs, help someone in need. You could take part, we're doing a lot of environmental cleanups across the country at local parks, at waterways, at historic sites. And as a matter of fact, you can find an event near you if you're looking for something to do tomorrow. If you want to get involved, give a few hours of volunteer service to your country. You can go to kennedy24.com/September 11th Day of Service. I also posted the link here at the top of this Twitter space. If you go to the Nest up at the top, you'll see some pinned tweets. And there's a link to the Kennedy 24 events page. I also have a page up there. I posted the event that I'm doing. And so I'm asking if anybody here in the space, I'm curious if anyone listening tonight has organized something in their area, something they'd like to talk to us about. We'd love to hear all about it. We want to know what it is that you're doing for your country because Bobby Kennedy asked you to. And did you answer his call this year? Did you organize something? I hope that you'll raise your hand when we go to the Q&A, which, well, let's just do it right now. I'm going to open the floor to questions and comments. I do want to go to my friend Jay Scott first because I forgot to bring him up when we were on the panel. So Jay was my guest last night on a show that I do, the Strange Bedfellows podcast. I hope you guys will watch. It was a really, really great interview. I met Jay through the Kennedy 24 campaign. We've become great friends. Jay lives down there in Austin, Texas, my hometown, and where I spent most of my life. So we've, you know, it's amazing how you forge friendships when you work in a political campaign. You forge friendships with people across the political divide in this campaign, which makes it unique of any campaign I've ever worked in. You know, usually I was working in a certain party and, you know, if it's a libertarian campaign, the only people involved are libertarians. If it's a Democrat campaign, the only people there are Democrats or Republicans, if it's a Republican campaign. This is really different, guys. I've never seen anything quite like it. Never. Where I've been on a campaign, supposedly with a guy in the Democratic Party, but most of the people that I've met, and I've met hundreds by now, are not Democrats or used to be Democrats, but they left a long time ago. I've met Greens. I've met so many libertarians and Republicans and progressives, but very few Democrats. So also I want to send out a request. If there are people listening who are Democrats, I want to hear from you. If you're currently a registered Democrat, if you want Mr. Kennedy to stay in the Democratic Party, we'd like to hear from you too, because most of the people on this panel tonight have all been giving reasons why he should leave. And of course, that's the main topic tonight is should RFK leave the Democratic Party? And I'd really like to get everyone's opinions on that. If you think he should go, if you think he should stay, and tell us why you think he should stay in the Democratic Party and fight it out against a party that doesn't seem to want him. Maybe you can make that make sense for us. So I'm going to open up the floor here, go to the Q&A portion of the show. I'm just going to ask a few things. I'm going to ask that you stay on topic. Try not to wander off into any topics that weren't on the list. If you're coming in late and you don't know what topics we've already covered, you can scroll up to the nest here at the top of the space and scroll through the topics that we're talking about tonight and pick one that you'd like to talk about. We're going to ask that you limit your comments to 5 minutes or less. No self-promotion, don't come in and plug your show or your band or whatever. We ask that you keep it about Mr. Kennedy. If you could keep the profanity to a minimum, that would be great, because I do edit this show into a family-friendly podcast that goes out across a lot of different platforms. So we try to keep the profanity to a minimum. No insults, no personal attacks. We ask that you be kind. We're trying to heal the divide. That's what this campaign is all about. And we're trying to heal our country. So we ask that you don't attack Mr. Kennedy personally or engage in any partisan attacks. You're welcome to disagree with him on the issues. And I'm always curious to hear points of view from those who don't always agree with Bobby. I think we have to be honest and you're never going to find a candidate that you agree with 100% of the time on 100% of the issues. Bobby and I disagree on some, not much, but we have our disagreements on some issues too. And that's okay. I think like Jimmy Dore said to Cornel West this week, he was trying to make Cornel West a better candidate by sometimes being a tough critic. And I think that's important. So without further ado, I'm going to take the first speaker, and that's my friend Jay Scott, who's our guest on Strange Bedfellows last night. And hello, Jay. Good evening. Good evening. How are you?
Hey, good evening, Lori. Thanks for inviting me on the panel again. It's great to be here, amongst, really accomplished, company. So appreciate you bringing me on the panel. Now, as far as the day of service goes, I think it's a great idea, and it brings back the same spirit that his uncle ran on, talking about, asking not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. So I have volunteered, a little bit in the past. I'm not going to say I've done it as much as I should have, but and I think everyone gives back in different ways. So, mine would be, a few different ways. But for the day of service, I did go ahead and volunteer with another Kennedy volunteer here in Austin to give away a few care packages. So there's a pretty big homeless population exploding over here in Austin. We know it's not just in Austin, it's in a lot of major cities around the country. So just, knowing that what I'm putting my volunteering times towards is actually having an instant impact on people's lives is, one of the main reasons why I chose that. So overall,
I love that you're doing that. Austin is my hometown, and I'm stunned what I've seen the past 5 or 10 years. We never, ever had a homeless problem like that in Austin, where you've got, people camping in neighborhoods and camping on the green belt and, camping at Town Lake and under every bridge and downtown off 6th Street, that big homeless camp. It's just incredibly sad to see. And I know why, because one of the reasons I had to leave Austin was it's one of those cities that became completely unaffordable to live in if you're working class. Austin has become like Silicon Valley type expensive. It's the most expensive city in Texas to live in. The rents are out of control. And of course, when you have that, when housing's unaffordable, you're going to have a homeless explosion. And I call them Bidenvilles. You heard of Hoovervilles back during the Great Depression, right? People living in tent cities, and they called them Hoovervilles after President Hoover. I call them Bidenvilles because, yes, we had them under President Trump. We had them under President Obama, but not like this. Not like this.
Yeah, no, you're right. The homeless population and is growing, and as far as the rent prices go, it's actually cheaper than where I'm coming from, because I'm one of the transplants that just moved to Texas, but in some of the major cities, it's even more expensive than it is over here in Austin. So yes, you're right, and that's why I hope whoever wins starts to try to address the housing problem a little bit. But I was going to say, for someone running, third party and independent, which, it's looking more and more like Kennedy will take that route. I'm hoping they do also bring up ranked choice voting as an issue. I know there's a few different things happening at the same time, and that could, complicate the picture. But ranked choice voting would be an institutional change that could really give third party candidates and independent candidates a more consistent chance at the state and local levels too. And I feel like it actually gives the everyday person a greater reason to kind of stay engaged in local politics, because they'll feel like it's not just the spoiler effect. If they want to explore a different route, and it gives more people the opportunity to get engaged if there's a few more political parties in the mix. So I hope that's an issue that does get raised a little bit later in the campaign. And personally, last thing, then I will hand it off. I would say I hope that he takes I didn't know about the ballot access before like this conversation, so I do need to do a little bit more research on that. But if he does go with the third party, I do think Nick Brana and the People's Party does present like a good chance at unifying the country, because again, he's someone who focuses on unifying people on both the left and the right. And I think that same spirit and building with a party that has that goal of a populist message at the forefront, I think that could be a powerful, lasting movement that endures beyond one election. Because we also have to think, if RFK runs outside of the Democratic Party and the Democratic Party continues on the same path it's on right now, it's still a monster we're going to have to deal with eventually. So I think getting a strong third party going, bringing in ranked choice voting, it presents a good chance to build even a coalition. So who knows how that could work out. But
well, I'm sure that Nick Brana is very happy to hear you say that. Nick, would you like to respond? Sounds like Jay really likes your party.
Well, thank you, Jay. No, I mean, it would be amazing, because I think we share what you just said with Kennedy, and that is a desire to bring people together from across the political spectrum, left and right, because we're at this point in our country's history where what we have in common with each other, whether you say you're on the left or the right or wherever you think yourself, in the center politically, what we have in common with each other is so much greater than what any of us have in common, with any of these oligarchs and billionaires and tech giants or deep state actors who are running our lives, And I think it's that fundamental interest that can bring us together. And I think, Will was getting to this too. Just coming together around that to do what we agree on can really be the start of a path forward for this country. And part of what has given me such a great conviction about that is the fact that my family comes from a country that was basically where the government was overthrown in a CIA coup from Chile. And a military dictatorship was installed for 17 years under General Augusto Pinochet. It was a brutal dictatorship. 30,000 people were murdered or disappeared. And the way that finally came to an end, that dictatorship, was that 17 different political parties from across the political spectrum all came together and around this one campaign to restore democracy in the country. And the Pinochet regime was forced to kind of allow them a plebiscite, a referendum on this topic. And the referendum was completely rigged. They gave them 15 minutes of airtime in the middle of the night, and it
Wow.
was just total bullshit. But the power of all of those groups having come together, despite all of their differences, to make this one demand that we want democracy restored in our country, succeeded. And that's how the dictatorship was brought down. And that's what it's going to take, I think, to bring it down in the United States, this authoritarian, metastasizing regime that we have, this duopoly that we have. So that's one of the things that, I'm glad that that's coming across, Jay, to you and to others. That's what we've sought to do with Rage Against the War Machine. I think somebody mentioned it earlier. We are going to be doing another Rage Against the War Machine early next year. And we have some amazing, even bigger plans for that one. So absolutely, we think that's the path forward. And, in any way that we can move forward those kinds of coalitions, it's gonna make things happen. There's a beautiful thing that's happened. Probably my favorite, the most inspiring thing that's come out of Rage Against the War Machine is that, so many of us, I feel, whether we're libertarians, members of the People's Party, whether we're with CPI, different groups, so many of us were not in contact with each other, along all these different political ideologies and whatnot. And now we're here, and Irene in particular deserves great credit for this. She's such a uniter. We're here talking to each other on this show. We're talking to each other in organizing threads. People of all kinds of different ideologies are now talking to each other. And if that isn't evidence that we can't come together and work together, against this machine on the things that we agree on, then I don't know what is.
Isn't it beautiful? I love it. That's
It
been
is.
the best thing about the past year. I mean, there's nothing good about a war, but at least the war is finally bringing these people together, these various groups. It's the war that was the catalyst that made us come together and put our differences aside to work for the greater good, for world peace, for stopping a nuclear war. And we all know that Robert Kennedy is on board with that. I think he's the strongest anti-war candidate in this race. And I think that's the one issue that unites almost all of us. I don't think there's too many pro-war people listening right now. But, Nick, I wanted, while I've got Jay here and you're here, when Jay was on my show last night, he did Strange Bedfellows with me. We were talking about Dr. Cornel West. And I asked Jay, if Robert Kennedy wasn't running, obviously Jay's one of our best volunteers on the Kennedy 24 campaign. We don't want to lose him. We want to keep him. But I said, if Kennedy wasn't running, which candidate would you support? And he said, well, Dr. Cornel West. He's a longtime admirer of Dr. West. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about what happened this week on the Jimmy Dore show when Dr. West went on. Of course, that interview's gone viral. Some people say that Jimmy destroyed Dr. West's campaign. Some people say that Dr. West destroyed Jimmy Dore. So I don't know who won that debate between the two of them. But I wanted to ask your thoughts, Nick, because you're a very persuasive guy. You've persuaded me on so many things. You're probably persuading people in this space right now. If Bobby listens to it, maybe you'll persuade him to run independent. Maybe he'll run with the People's Party. I kind of hope he does. It's very intriguing. You guys need a candidate. But you're so persuasive. You talked Dr. West into running for president this year. So I have to ask you, since you're the one who started his presidential campaign, is his presidential campaign over? And did Jimmy Dore destroy it? Do you think he'll continue? Do you think, I know you told me that you think he'll fold. Tell me why you think he'll fold, when you think he'll fold, and what will happen with the Green Party, because then they're going to need a candidate too.
I don't think it's over, but I think that it would be a Herculean task to resuscitate it at this point. When we began speaking with him about running, and Dr. Cornel West, to his credit, he when we left the Democratic Party, the group of us who were on the Bernie 2016 campaign, volunteers, staff, delegates, and we formed the People's Party, which began as Draft Bernie for a People's Party. Dr. Cornel West was one of the first people who stood up and really took us seriously. He said, yeah, completely agree with them, that this ragtag group, and he did Democracy Now! With me, and we invited Bernie to the Draft Bernie Town Hall. We did that at American University Law School, had a convention there where we invited Bernie to join us. And ironically, it was Dr. Cornel West, Jimmy Dore, Shama Sawant, and myself who hosted that, the Draft Bernie Town Hall. And, so I can attest, and also because, Jimmy's a friend, I can attest.
I remember that town hall was awesome. I remember that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It was.
Cool.
It's amazing to think about it now.
Mm-hmm.
I can attest to how much admiration Jimmy has for Dr. Cornel West, and me as well, which makes it, which is why we approached him, to run with us. But and we of course discussed with him, and he knew, because he spoke also at our founding convention in 2020, August 2020, the People's Convention. We were at 1 million viewers. He spoke there, and he was one of the keynote speakers, and so we talked about with him, the kind of campaign that we think is really going to be successful, a populist campaign. It's going to be one where we're reaching out to people across the working class, regardless of their political ideology. We're uniting on what we agree on. And, and he was on board with that. So we said, okay, this is great. Unfortunately, when we launched the campaign, the campaign launch was amazing. I mean, massive media coverage, all over the place. I mean, I think we did what I've never seen an independent left campaign ever do, which is just completely destroy the media blackout. He was being talked about. The video we created was, watched tens of millions of times on social media, replayed on the mainstream media, all the television networks. So it was great. And there was this kind of magical moment there where he even was going on conservative shows like Fox News with Laura Ingraham. And he was talking with Laura Ingraham, of all people. You would think, God, they have so little in common. And they were talking about uniting populists on the left and the right. And it was awesome. It's like, that's exactly what we need to be doing. And so then I think the establishment saw that, and there was like this, this moment of terror. And they said, this can't be allowed to happen, and there was this immediate just smear campaign against the People's Party, and all kinds of lies were thrown at us about, the People's Party doesn't have ballot access, so therefore he's not going to be able to run. And of course, what they weren't telling you was that you can get ballot access during a presidential campaign. That's generally how you get it. It's especially in a new party. That's how the Green Party got ballot access in the first place, by running Ralph Nader. And so, all kinds of other things. So, the typical things that you get when you're trying to organize along class lines, when you're trying to bring people together from different ideologies. The same things we got during Rage Against the War Machine. You're a right winger, you're a grifter, you're a racist, you're a sexist. All these things that they throw. Like people criticized us, for example. They said the Libertarian Party, they've been criticized by the Southern Poverty Law Center, as white supremacists and whatnot. It's like, give me a break. We're coming together to organize around, first of all, I don't think that's true. I think it's ridiculous. But second of all, we're coming together to organize against war and nuclear war. And you can't set aside whatever ridiculous virtue signal, purity test, cancel culture obsession you have, to be able to even organize against a nuclear war. I can't think of an issue that should be more unifying than mutually assured destruction. So, unfortunately, too many people in Cornel West's circle, we're of that mentality. We're of that really woke identity politics mentality. and they just went at him in podcast after podcast, and it was really sad because they fell for this Democratic Party smear campaign, these mainstream media, Democrat-aligned media outlets that were coming after us, and they just fell for that, and they regurgitated the lies that were being stated there because they were fundamentally opposed to our politics. They were fundamentally opposed to the fact that we believe in actually uniting people and coming together across political ideologies. And so that unfortunately led him to decide to leave. And the decision was very quick. It was within 24 hours, and he switched to the Green Party. And, we watched the campaign for 3 months. For 3 months, we kind of we said, we're gonna see, okay, let's see how this goes, and unfortunately, it's just been everything that I think has been wrong, unfortunately, with the Green Party, which has been the banner carrier of the independent left in this country since the 80s. And unfortunately, they haven't broken 1% in the last 20 years. And so and so often they're siding, like we said, I know a few days ago, they're siding against working people in this country. I mean, they were for the mandates. They were for Russiagate. They were for the war in Ukraine they were for the wars when they ran Howie Hawkins, their candidate before then. So as Kim Iverson said when she covered this, they're really a party that doesn't seem to know what it believes and what it stands for, and it's all over the place, and it's siding with these kind of identity politics, time after time. And if there is going to be a party that comes around, speaking as someone who comes from the left, if there is going to be a party that comes around that is able to unify people from across different political ideologies, it's going to focus on these issues that we all hold in common. It's going to focus on war. It's going to focus on wages. It's going to focus on healthcare, rent. It's going to focus on these daily stressors that we all feel at all times. And that's just not what the Green Party, unfortunately, does. So it was very sad because we felt like it was this big opportunity to really kind of reinvent, the left and this populist kind of movement in the United States in a way that is a lot more viable. But,
you know what? At any other time in our history, Nick, and you'd probably agree, at any other time in the past, like when I was trying to convince Bobby to run back in 2008, I was, kind of trying to nudge him towards the Green Party. I thought at any other time he would have been the perfect candidate for the Green Party, the best candidate they've had since Ralph Nader, certainly because of his long history of work on the environment. It seems he would be an absolutely perfect fit for the Green Party. And traditionally, his values tend to be more progressive left. But of course, the COVID pandemic in the past 3 years and the Trump era has turned everything on its head. It's like we live in an upside down world now in terms of politics. And the Green Party's gone woke. And it's just like Jimmy Dore said when he talked to Cornel West the other day. He said, it sounds like you've just done a 45-minute commercial for Joe Biden and the Democrats. And I don't think he was wrong. I think he was absolutely right. So even if Cornel's campaign folds, even if he drops out ultimately and the Greens need a different nominee and Bobby might be looking for a party, you'd think the Green Party would be the natural, most obvious place for him to go. And yet, I'm not so sure the Green Party would want him. They seem to disagree on damn near everything except the environment. What do you think, Nick?
No, I don't think they would ever embrace him. And I think that's a testament to how sectarian and how siloed they've become, unfortunately. And this isn't to say that everyone in the Green Party is that way. There's a lot of people in the Green Party that disagree with their leadership, but this is the leadership that has kind of entrenched themselves in the Green Party and has driven it in this direction. That is what has, sided with the mandates and the wokeness and all of this and the wars. When we organized Rage Against the War Machine, shout out to Angela McArdle. She definitely, deserves a lot of credit in all of our coalition conversations. I mean, her and me and so many other people worked our asses off. Irene, Will, and other peoples with the Schiller Institute. We worked our asses off to pull that off. And this whole time, what the Green Party was doing? They were having an internal debate for 2 months over whether they even opposed the war in the first place on the
Incredible.
DNC. Because
Wow.
half of the on the Green National Committee, because half of the Green National Committee is kind of in the Howie Hawkins faction, where they are like pro Ukraine war, so
And they were pro-vaccine mandates too, right?
That too.
Mask mandates, vaccine mandates, they were for all that, right?
That too, exactly. So how can an anti-establishment party be siding with the deep state, with the establishment, with the Democratic Party over and over and over again? Which is part of why we exist. I don't think that the People's Party would have existed or even been created if these issues in the Green Party didn't exist in the first place and weren't so damning, frankly.
Exactly. And I would like to get Holden Collada's thoughts on that. He's been with the Forward Party, I think, since it was formed by Andrew Yang. And I think, if Holden can hear me, you can unmute your mic. But I just wanted to ask your thoughts, Holden, on the Forward Party. I asked you the other day privately if you think that Yang might endorse Robert Kennedy, or if the Forward Party might want to court him as their potential nominee if they're planning to nominate a candidate next year. But I kind of wanted to get your thoughts on that, if you don't mind sharing them. And I think you told me that you recently left the Forward Party, and maybe you'd like to share with us why you left.
Yeah, thanks for bringing me up, Lori. This is a fantastic space so far. Thank you to you and Nick for hosting this. It's, first of all, just great. Like, I love what I'm hearing from Nick about, this rage against the war machine coming back. That's fantastic. I think that kind of thing is so missing today, and that's like cuts across all these different party lines. That I'm 22 years old. I've never seen a real anti-war movement in my life. I was too young to remember when Iraq happened and all of that, and then throughout the next few decades of the war on terror, like, I was just always shocked that there was not this really strong opposition to it. That I'm really glad to see that happening, and I'd love to be a part of that. I did step away from the Forward Party last week. I think, I don't think they would be interested in endorsing RFK. Personally, I think I mentioned to you that Andrew Yang donated to Chris Christie before.
Did
so,
what?
And that,
Why?
That happened a couple weeks before I left. So that was part of, thinking like,
well,
maybe
I don't
I'm
blame
not
you for leaving. What the hell?
Yeah. So, that was
Can
one
you
of
make
the
that
things.
make sense? Why would Andrew Yang give Chris Christie money?
I think I think it's a TDS, right? It's Trump derangement syndrome. There's a lot of people there who are really kind of focused on, like, Trump is the, singular threat to American democracy right now, like that whole kind of narrative. And it's, unfortunate to see, because I really liked what, Forward kind of started out as, with this focus on election reform, on, focusing on local politics. But, it at the top level, it's very kind of, just focused on anti-Trump, and that's not at all what I think is needed right now. Like, Trump was the reaction to the corruption, the everything that was going on, like that. He was the reaction to that. He's not like the problem in and of itself.
Exactly. And that sounds exactly like what the Green Party is doing. It sounds like they've also got Trump derangement syndrome. Hearing Dr. West talk on Jimmy Dore this week, I mean, he said that Trump was the biggest fascist since Adolf Hitler, and we have to stop Trump at all costs. And, it's just, it sounds like both of these parties are both suffering Trump derangement syndrome to a high degree.
It's disappointing, yeah. And Dr. West's his interview the other day was definitely disappointing as well, where they're really losing track of that populist message that I think I'm loving what I'm hearing from the People's Party for sure. I would love to see from what the conversation's been about Kennedy leaving the Democratic Party. I would love to see him go independent or maybe with the People's Party. I think this kind of populist message is very simple, like that resonates with people. That's exactly what people are looking for right now. And I would love to see that kind of movement turn into, this broader movement beyond a presidential campaign. Jay Scott, I appreciate what you were saying earlier, brother, about we've got to really turn this into a broader alternative party movement. Where I think if you got one person at the top, like if Kennedy is going to lead it, for example, that would be fantastic. But if you have, you can organize around this simple message like populism, anti-war, because I think, the anti-war thing is what's really, really resonating with me right now. And I think for a lot of people too, is like that $8 trillion we've spent on war, like there you go, is the reason for why so many people are suffering right now. Like if we hadn't spent all that money on wars, on everything, I think that really cuts to the heart of what's wrong in our country today. So I'm loving what I'm hearing from Nick about the People's Party here. And yeah, disappointing to see, this Trump derangement syndrome just kind of, I think, ruining a lot of anti-establishment positions that people, a lot of people who want to be on that anti-establishment train, they kind of get co-opted in one way or another. I think a lot of the time it's just because of money. A lot of these parties will think like, I need money, I need to raise, I need to talk to big donors, whatever. And it's easy to get co-opted and, just kind of follow what the big donors want to do, exactly what's happening in the Democratic Party too. Like that's just the same thing we see out of the two major parties. So I'm loving this, populist message. So glad to hear that Rage Against the War Machine is going to be coming back and turning into a more regular thing. I would love to be a part of that. And that's great to hear.
That's awesome. And I'm glad you're still with us here. Thank you so much for your support of Bobby Kennedy. And congratulations on leaving the Forward Party. I don't blame you a bit.
Thank you both thanks for having me up here. This is a fantastic space. I appreciate it.
I always enjoy having you, Holden. It's great to talk to you. I'm going to go to Mike Kelly next. I see Mike's got his hand up. Mike, what's on your mind?
So a lot of what Nick said resonates, and how the media will use bias that it has to go after certain outside the duopoly candidates to kind of, put them on the back burner or make them look bad. And, much of like what he said about the Rage Against the War Machine with the Libertarian Party, they're a bunch of, racist and stuff like that. And I'm, I kind of helped Chase Oliver campaign 3 different events this year, 2 in Kansas, 1 in Missouri. And, he was the guy earlier this, or late last year, through the Warnock-Walker race, into a runoff. But, he's, LGBTQ and, a libertarian at the same time and all that. And, but they see what they want to see. They see the hate they want to see, I guess. And then 2, Nick, if you ever host any spaces, I definitely want to see them and get on them. Just personally, I'm a 25-year vet. I spent 5 years in the Middle East fighting these dumb wars. And, thank you.
Wow. Thank you for your service. This September 11th, I really want to thank everybody who fought in these dumb wars. And I think both of those wars were unnecessary. But you stepped up and you served your country, and thank you for that, Mike. And I see that Jay had his hand up too. Did you want to add to that, Jay?
Absolutely, Mike. By the way, I just followed you, so please message me.
Yeah, thanks for bringing me back up again, Lori. And yeah, appreciate the kind words, Holden. And like you said, it's really all about not focusing on the labels as much as, what's socialist, what's capitalist, and who is which ism or ist, and focusing on the solutions. And that's another reason why I think, Kennedy is the most effective candidate, because he has solutions that no one else is talking about right now, specifically with his idea for rehab centers. So he's taken a great idea, which almost everyone agrees on, legalizing marijuana, and he's proposed two uses that are clearly identifiable, and that's rehabbing people who have drug problems, as well as getting organic food back on the shelves by helping them learn new skills that can be applicable in any community. So, I think it's a really good program that ties a lot of good ideas together, and it's something that people can see, helping their lives in specific ways. So by focusing less on, what ideas are capitalist and which ideas are socialist, and just focusing on the solutions themselves, I just think it's a much more productive conversation, and it allows a lot more to get done. So, but yeah, thanks for the shout out.
Love it. And I want to bring up our next speaker. I think I pronounced the name right. Tell me if I'm wrong. Is it Johnny Moringa? Hey, Johnny. Good evening. Can you hear me? You can unmute your mic and speak now, or forever hold your peace. Are you there, Johnny?
Hey, thank you. Appreciate it.
Unmute your mic. Hello.
Hello, hello. Can we hear me now? How's it going?
Very good. Go ahead. Do you have a question or comment?
Yes. Thank you so much for holding this space. Yes, Bobby is so happy to have somebody speaking about some of the issues that are under the radar. Somebody who's against the war machine, against the censorship, the medical tyranny, and there's just so many issues to talk about. He has gotten a little bit out there. He had the Let the Farmers Speak conference recently. I love that Bobby has, he was leading the charge against Monsanto and getting the first lawsuit won concerning glyphosate in our food, which is just, wow, such a massive issue. This stuff has been Dr. Stephanie Seneff has some published research that shows that this stuff has a 99% correlation with the increased incidence of autism and, dozens of serious conditions. We're talking Alzheimer's, dementia, cancers, autoimmune diseases, obesity, on and on. And so it's just great to have somebody not in the pockets of these profiteers speaking the truth on behalf of our health and freedoms. So, yeah, and you were talking about the day of service. I'm going to be planting some yucca with some friends tomorrow, hopefully. Yucca is
oh, cool.
Yeah, yucca is the number one calorie source for over 1 billion people. So, it's something that's easy for people to grow organically. It doesn't need great soil, pretty drought tolerant. Yeah, I think, the more we can start to get back towards local agriculture in our communities done right, it's just so important for our wellness. I was talking about glyphosate there. There was a chart I was trying to post in the comments when you called me up. We're living 6 years less than our European counterparts as far as our lifespan, where those numbers were on par 40 years ago. And we're using 100 plus chemicals in our agricultural system that they've banned. And it's just so important. I mean, it's just what's more important than the health of us and our loved ones. And so I just really appreciate Bobby getting the word out about all these issues that are so important. We're just letting these profiteers run roughshod over our health and freedoms. We've legalized bribery in the form of so-called lobbying. And whether it's right, libertarian or Republican or the Green Party or the People's Party, to see somebody in there who's really a public servant. These people are supposed to be public servants. And we lose that. I just like the idea of instead of anyone just calling anybody government anymore, they're all about changing the way we frame everything with the language. It's You guys are public servants. Let's get back to that. And
They work for us.
yes,
They work for
exactly.
us.
And even these
And
Vanguard
they're
and State
supposed
Street
to.
and these guys who are just such, with the top-down totalitarian control they want to bring, these guys are managing our money. It's like, what is going on, you guys? So, yeah, getting back to just
That's
what's
right.
natural, what's in our blood. We can, across cultures, across thousands of years, we've been producing everything we need locally. And we've lost that resilience. So we saw during COVID that there were supply chain disruptions that really affected, it gave us food shortages in the States. And, we have way bigger challenges than COVID that could be coming down the pike. So, yeah, just to get back to that community autonomy. And this is really independence from this consumerism and these profiteers. This is real freedom. So this is the autonomy, the self-determination, the sovereignty. Getting back to that is, just so important. And for the Day of Freedom coming up tomorrow, I invite people to consider, leaning into that. So many ways.
That's awesome. I love that you're doing that. And excuse me, I wanted to ask, have you posted your event on the Kennedy 24 website? We've got a section where anybody who's doing something for the day of service tomorrow can post it, can invite people. And the list is getting pretty long. It's amazing how many events we have going across the states. Where are you located?
I'm usually in Florida, but right now I'm visiting some friends in Costa Rica. So, we're going to be doing.
Oh, so you're doing this event in Costa Rica?
Yes.
Wow, that's pretty cool too.
Yeah, we're in the middle of rain season, so we've got enough time to get some more stuff in the ground. Especially, the yucca is a good hardy one. So, and the one other thing I wanted to add is just you were mentioning about how Bobby would be as a good fit for a libertarian party. And of course it wouldn't be perfect in every aspect, but I've thought before, you go back to like, what is government about? It's about, protecting our life and liberty. And I love that the libertarian, principles are just like, hey, government needs to be just big enough to protect, him from her and her from him. And, it's the opposite of that, right? They're really like, government is helping the profiteers, really like, like we said, impair our health and freedoms. And, I love when Bobby talks about getting in there and really being able to clean up the swamp. And, because of what he's been doing in his career, going after these big guys, that he knows the players, he knows the actors, he knows how to clean it up, he knows who to put in charge. So, I loved Ron Paul, and you talk about, somebody like him, shutting down, all the different sectors of government. I don't know how practical that really is, but, somebody like Bobby getting in there and really kind of knowing the way a lot of these things work and being able to really clean up the swamps, so to speak. I think, he could really, kind of accomplish a lot of the goals of a lot of libertarians. So thanks.
What's interesting? Of course, I'm a longtime libertarian myself, been voting libertarian for 27 years. And I'd be thrilled if he ran with our party. But, the more the space goes on, the more I talk to people and listen to people. And I look at the poll that I'm running. And I hope everyone will take a moment to vote. That poll is posted here at the top of the space, asking which party you think Bobby Kennedy should run with. And I'd love to hear from everyone. But it's interesting, the more I talk to people and Kennedy's supporters, they support him because of what he is pledging to do. They support him because of what he's saying. They really don't seem to care all that much what party he runs with. Most people obviously agree by the looks of that poll. 63% say he should run as an independent with no party affiliation at all. And wow, that's really exciting. So on the subject of independence, like I said earlier in this space, I think that Bobby could do better than any independent candidate in American history. The last time an American independent did really well was 1992, when Ross Perot took, I think, 21% of the vote in the general election, and that was astonishing. And ever since, he's the reason why independent candidates now can't get on a debate stage. I call it the Perot effect. And, the movement that we see today in the Kennedy campaign, this healing the divide, this agreeing across ideological lines on bigger issues, so much of this populist movement today really started with Ross Perot, if you think about it. If you're old enough to remember 1992 and that race, Ross Perot truly was a pioneer. He was one of those pioneers, just like Ron Paul, who, lit the flame that is now turned into a raging bonfire. So I wanted to bring in the Perot independents who asked to speak. And, I miss Ross Perot. I thought he was a very positive, energizing force in our political landscape and really deserves so much of the credit for the, planting the seeds, if you will, of the populist movement today. So hello, Perot independents. Introduce yourself and tell us what's on your mind tonight.
Lori, thank you so much for having this space. And I just wanted to throw in 1992, Ross Perot won 18.9% of the vote. He won 19.8 million votes, the most of any modern third-party candidate, and the most since. And I think that's exactly why Kennedy should run as an independent. People loved Perot, and he is, I think, the founding father of the modern-day populist movement. And if I had to say who best represents Perot, I thought Trump was going to be that person. I don't think so anymore. I think that the person best to pick up the Perot mantle is RFK. RFK is not going to be bought by anybody. RFK is not going to allow any special interest group to tell him what to do, much like Ross Perot did in 1992. So I think if we learn the lesson of political third parties, Ross Perot ran as an independent in 1992 and won 18.9% of the popular vote. He then created a political party known as the Reform Party and won 8.4% of the popular vote. Still getting that Reform Party FEC funding. But that was the power of Perot, right? And so I think if you allow Kennedy to run as an independent, bought by no man, taken by no party. And let's be real, if the libertarians could have done it, they would have done it already. They had their chance in 2016, and they dropped the ball hard. So I don't think a libertarian candidate's going to be able to do it, and I don't think the party's going to be able to do it. But I think an independent who has money to be able to fund himself that Kennedy has, and can bring in the donors that just are sick and tired of the duopoly. I think, yes, you're right, Lori. He can beat Ross Perot, and he can actually be a game changer. I truly believe Kennedy can beat both Biden and Trump, without a doubt.
Glad to hear you say that. I'm glad to know somebody out there agrees with me. I truly believe that he can. I think that, Trump had his time. Trump started a movement. And he gave the populist movement that guys like Ross Perot, Pat Buchanan, Ron Paul, Dennis Kucinich, Ralph Nader, in their own way, all of them were contributors to what we have now. But Trump actually did make it to the White House. He had 4 years in office to show us if he could drain the swamp, to show us what he was made of, to show us if he was a man of his word, if he was going to keep his promise that he made to the American people. And unfortunately, he let us down on a lot of those promises. A lot of us here are probably former Trump voters. Some of us voted for Trump once. Some of us may have voted for him twice. Once was enough for me. Fool me once, as they say. I wasn't going to let him fool me twice. His first term showed me what he was all about, showed me that he didn't drain the swamp. He hired the swamp. When you looked at his cabinet, you saw nothing but swamp rats and swamp creatures. And to me, that points to judgment. I think that President Trump lacks the judgment, just as he, fumbled the ball during COVID, and he took the wrong advice from the wrong people, and he locked us down. Trump gave us the national mask mandates. He didn't give us vaccine mandates. I don't think he would have gone that far. But then again, we'll never really know about that. We won't know because Trump wasn't president at the time. It was Joe Biden, of course, who mandated the vaccines in September of 2021. But at that time, Trump was not the president. Who knows? He might have done the same thing. Trump was certainly captive to his friends in Big Pharma, as we all know. And that's the reason why Robert Kennedy was not selected ultimately to head that Vaccine Safety Commission for Donald Trump in 2017, because instead, Dr. Fauci had his say and Pfizer had their say. Big Pharma weighed in and said, oh, no, you're not bringing Robert Kennedy into this administration. So I feel like the voters have, they've had their chance to evaluate Trump. He had 4 years to prove himself as president, and he showed you who he was. So, Mike, did you
We
have some
also
thoughts on
got,
that?
if I could say, Lori, we also got the lockdowns and Operation Warp Speed and the
Yeah.
CARES Act. All of that was Trump.
Mhm.
I mean, Trump signed it. So I mean, between all of that, it's just catastrophic what it did to people in this country. I remember 50 million unemployment claims. In a country of 330 million people, 15 million people knocked off their employer health care.
Yeah.
So, and then of course everything, with the vaccines. I mean, the massive, dangerous pharma giveaway that was. So, yeah, I think when it came down to it, I completely agree with you. Is that Trump, unfortunately, he did not drain the swamp. He sided with the swamp. He got there and he made peace with the swamp. He took the easy way out. And he participated in the continuing of the arming of Ukraine,
That's right.
as president. So, I
Because they
mean,
demanded it. I mean, they literally
right.
threatened him with impeachment. They impeached him for it. They basically put a gun to Trump's head and said, you give us the money and weapons for Ukraine or we're going to destroy you. And he said, okay, okay. I mean, he was coerced oftentimes into cooperation with the swamp, and they had their methods, right? Just like Chuck Schumer said after Trump won the 2016 election, said, if you mess with the CIA, with the swamp, they have 6 ways from Sunday of getting back at you. And
Right.
they showed Trump again and again and again those 6 ways from Sunday, and they're still showing him that right now with all of the criminal charges against him and his associates. The swamp is sending him a message: you play ball with us or else. And they're going
And
to do the same thing to Bobby.
exactly. I was just going to say that if Bobby goes independent, and he really threatens, the machine in a serious way, they're going to throw everything that they're throwing at Trump at him, in terms of, the Democrats trying to criminalize a political opponent, using the Department of Justice, the FBI as if it was their personal prosecutor.
Mhm.
They're going to do all of that, and more. And that in itself is obviously going to be a threat that we're going to need to fight back. And this is something that Bernie got right, although he wasn't serious about it. He said, even if I'm elected president, I'm going to need a movement of, thousands of people in the streets, pressing for my agenda. Bobby's going to need the same thing. It's not going to be enough, to think that we could just put a president in there and they're going to be able to confront all the deep state and all the intelligence agencies, all the forces that are going to be aligned against him. And the other part is that movement has to exist to keep Bobby accountable himself. Because we've seen too
Exactly.
many people who get there and who, and they face such overwhelming, menacing pressure on the one side, that they fold like Bernie did. And so they have to know, even if he goes independent, even if he wins, they've got to know that there is this movement that is not going to allow them not one step back, and that they're there for them. They're protecting them. They're shielding them, and that they're holding them accountable too.
Damn right. And I've said many times to Bobby since 2007, when I first started trying to convince him to run, we had a Draft Kennedy campaign of like-minded people who were literally willing to put our physical bodies on the line to take a bullet for this guy. If they're going to try and shoot him, Secret Service is great, private security is great, but we were literally willing to lay our lives down to protect him. I mean, a human shield of thousands of people physically protecting this man. And we're spiritually protecting him in our prayers. We're physically protecting him as best we can. And, we just want to protect Bobby, and everything that we're saying here tonight, all of the suggestions that we're offering up, we're offering with love, because we do want him to be our leader. We want him to be our future president. We want him to have 2 full terms, not 1 term, not 1,000 days like his Uncle Jack was, denied his 2nd term by an assassin's bullet. I want to see him win. I want to see him serve 2 full terms, and perhaps, maybe, that the path to the White House would be as an independent candidate. I wanted to bring in, let me add, as a speaker, I'd like to bring in Sherelle, who's a libertarian, and she also comments quite a bit on my posts and on my threads about Kennedy. I know she's quite a big supporter, and I would love to hear her thoughts on this. Sherelle, if you'd like to unmute your mic and introduce yourself. Hello.
Oh, hello. Yeah, Sherelle. Thanks for getting my name right. So I want to start out by saying I think ballot access is the most important thing. If he stays Democrat, he will not be on the November 24 ballot. Same thing for a Republican. I think it's a bad idea to try to do Republican because they don't want him there either. So I was thinking, because Libertarian is the 3rd largest party, that would be the best fit for him. I mean, he's already a civil libertarian. He's always on about the free market, anti-war. That's all, the top 3. But listening to Mike Kelly, I'm wondering if independent would be better, because it's about ballot access. And I don't know how that all works, but I thought libertarians had really good ballot access.
Mike, I see you got your hand up. Would you like to respond to that real quick?
Mike Kelly.
Yeah, so basically New York has made the laws to where a third party will not be able to get ballot access in New York. For libertarians in particular in New York, we would have to raise somewhere around $4 million and get like 280,000 signatures to get on a ballot in New York. We'd have to get both of those. Larry Sharp is trying to do it, but he thinks, it is a huge, bridge to get there in just one state. There's some other questionable states. I think we could get those other 49 pretty good, but New York is going to be the hard one. And if you just want to get on the ballot in New York, independent is way easier in New York and in most other states.
Interesting. Go ahead, Sherelle.
Yeah, well, I also wanted to say, in California, when I dim exited, I went to no party preference, which means that I can take a crossover ballot from Libertarian or Democratic. So whatever, however we get him on the ballot in November 24, it's not going to be Republican. Plus, I don't think he would do that. He doesn't want to do Republican. He's already said out loud that he will not run as Trump's VP for sure. So I know people keep talking about it. I don't think that's a possibility.
No, I don't either. There's such 2 different personality types for one thing. I couldn't really see them governing together. It just seems like that couldn't possibly work. Mike, did you want to add to that?
No, I want to wait till afterwards. I want to hit up on your previous point before this.
Okay. Sherelle, did you have anything else?
Just shout out to James Kroger. I see him right there next to me on the on the page.
Hi,
I've been following on Twitter. He's a pretty smart guy. So follow James Kroger.
Yeah, enjoy his tweets a lot. Good to see him here. So I'll go back to Mike. Mike, what do you got for me?
So, ma'am, we spoke about like the election and how Trump was won, and a lot of people had voted for him, I guess. But in my perspective, I think in the 2016, and I voted Trump 2016. I was an independent for about 20 years. I actually officially signed over as a libertarian in 2019. But my vote in particular, I voted against Hillary. I think, almost the candidate could have been anybody else. And I think a lot of independents and moderates did that. I think Republicans were going to, of course, vote against her anyway. But I think that's the vote he didn't, some of the vote he didn't recapture. in the last election, and I don't think he will capture again in 24. But I think, RFK could certainly get a lot of the independent and, moderate vote. And then as far as the war goes, people, I think, were voting against Hillary because they were voting against the Hillary and the Obama war machine, that we had seen 8 years of it. And it went into Syria and Yemen and Libya and all these different neocon type-esque conflicts. And, we thought Trump was going to get out of that. And I was in NATO in Afghanistan in 2017 and 18 when he made the decision to stay in Afghanistan. I was on the staff there. I was so disheartened when that happened. He said he would revisit the decision in 2019. And what he did then was basically he made this wimpy move to say, well, my last 6 months in office, we're going to start making preparations to withdraw. And it was just like, this is pathetic. And that was my take on it.
Yeah, I can only imagine how that felt for you being over there in the field in Afghanistan. Holden, I see you've got your hand up. Did you want to add something to that?
Yeah, I think, the experience point is really important here because, obviously a lot of people voted for Trump in 2016 because he didn't have that experience in DC. He had different kinds of experience and people were voting against experience in DC. But with Bobby, he has legit experience, going after these big corporations. I mean, when he said in that Fox town hall a couple months ago, my job over the last 40 years has been suing government agencies for corruption. Like that right. was probably one of the most powerful things he said. And that's why, the biggest Trump supporter I know in my life who was, all on board Trump's campaign since 2016 is now coming over to Kennedy's team because he sees this guy. He's like, yeah, this guy's actually legit. This guy's anti-corruption, populist, anti-establishment, all of it. But he means it, and he knows these agencies. He knows. So yeah, that kind of experience that you see with him is unlike anything, I've seen from a lot of different candidates. And that I think is resonating with people. One question I wanted to bring up about, running with different parties to pose to the panel is, is there a possibility of running with multiple parties? Like I know, state by state, some candidates can kind of get on the ballot with different parties. And I think it would be I think it would be a pretty powerful message to have, like I'm working with the People's Party, I'm working with the Libertarian Party, or I'm independent, in this state's whatever kind of works state by state. I think that would be a powerful message to have.
I don't honestly know the answer to that. I was wondering if Nick Brana might know the answer. Do you, Nick?
Yeah, I can speak to that. There's this form of voting that's allowed in a few states now called fusion voting. It exists in New York. It used to exist actually across the country, but the two parties basically outlawed it because it was helping the formation of independent parties, of third parties. And this is exactly what you're describing. It's where one candidate can run on the ballot line of multiple different parties. And so it's only a few states right now, New York being the biggest, where you can do that. Of course, you can do other things like, a party could not run a candidate and endorse someone running on a different ballot line. But as far as running on the same ballot line, there's only a few states, I think it's 4, that allow it.
That's unfortunate, but it's a really interesting concept. I like it. I like it.
This has been a Maverick Multimedia production.